Hello guys, welcome to Dr. Devil. So if you are new to the channel, please hit the subscribe button and press the bell icon to get the notification. Moving to our today's first story posted by THR0WAWAY112223. Our story begins in a little school called SUNYIT in upstate New York about 5 to 6 years ago. A state-run school that they tried to peddle as an institute of technology. This was a school that only had wireless in one building out of 6, had IT equipment from as far back as 1972 according to the date stamps, and professors who were uncaring part-timers, or in my case, senile. I was in what was called an experimental course, which meant it would count towards my degree but would be non-transferable. We were required to take at least 4 of these, 493, classes throughout our attendance to graduate. It was BS, but that was the rule. One of these classes was run by an elderly professor who was known for being intolerable, unrelenting, and a relic of the past. He constantly claimed he invented token ring, and how it was superior to Ethernet in almost every way. Every exam had a token ring-related question, and the only way to get a perfect score on that question was to perform academic fallatio and proclaim that the token ring was superior in that scenario because... whatever. Very 2 plus 2 equals 5 if you get me. Now the class itself was a mix of foreign graduate students from India and undergrad students from New York. We were typically assigned group work, and the 6 of us from New York would work together, turn in our papers, the usual, and the graduate students would do the same. For the final project, the professor decided that the undergraduates could learn better if they worked at the graduate level, so the normal teams were split up, and I was put on a team of all Indian graduate students. We were given 6 weeks to invent a product and apply previous course work and knowledge into making the product more technological. An example would be a lawnmower that you could control via a cell phone. We could simply say it was a lawnmower, but we'd have to explain in detail the protocols used over the network, encryption, error control, how it would handle signal degradation, etc. Very challenging, and yet a great way to show off what I've learned so far. Furthermore, we'd all have to grade each other in evaluation forms and get the other teammates to sign off on it. So if you wanted to give someone a C, you'd have to explain to them why you graded them that way. I was not a fan of this, as I felt it was the professor's job to grade us, not our fellow students. He was outsourcing his duties, but the chair of the department was new and didn't want to mess with a tenured teacher. This was the hand I was dealt. The first meeting my team had was lacking, to say the least. The graduate students contributed nothing. One of them worked on a paper from another class, and the other 2 were just chatterbugs. Any idea I had, they instantly approved of it. Felt good the first few times, but as time went on, it became apparent I was the only one doing the work. This pattern continued into weeks 2 and 3, and I finally said I couldn't make it anymore due to scheduling conflicts and we'd collaborate online via email. Of course, the grad students thought this was a great idea, and we didn't meet in person again, except in class as dictated by the professor. By week 4, I had done what I felt was my part of the work. I'd written 8 pages of content, describing how the product would work, its practical purposes, how it'd communicate over RFID, etc. The only thing I couldn't get my head wrapped around was the high-level stuff like error correction, signal drift, and that sort of thing. Math was never my strong point, but the grad students said it would be no problem. I thanked them, told them exactly what needed to be done, and even highlighted the important parts of the paper for them. At most, they'd have to write 1 page each to supplement my 8. They were getting a pretty sweet deal, and I was going to get to graduate. Win-win, I thought. Week 5 comes around and I'm expecting the email with the completed paper. There wasn't a whole lot of email traffic, none to be exact, for the past week. I send out an email asking for a status update since the paper is due next week, and will all fail if we miss the deadline. The final paper represents 40% of the final grade. I get an email 2 days before a deadline that we all need to meet in the library to finish the paper, and they've been busy with other coursework. At this point, I'm more nervous than angry, as my bum is on the line, and can't afford to fail a class and miss graduation. We decide on a time, reserve a room, and meet. They had nothing to show for the past 5 weeks. I know people on Reddit exaggerate the word literally a lot, but I can't overemphasize this enough. Nothing. I explained the situation we were all in, and how we'd all fail if we blew this, but they were cocky and sure that he'd never fail them, and they've had him before, etc., etc., etc. Excuses. They wanted me to bet my degree on excuses and false hope that was backed by nothing. After the meeting, I went to meet with the professor. At this point, I'm more scared than anything else. Too scared to be angry, but it was still there, and incredibly nervous that the old man wasn't going to budge. Sure enough, he didn't. I explained my case, showed him all the work I did, described every aspect of the project to him verbally to prove I made a full and honest attempt to get this done, but my teammates were holding me back. 80% of the time he didn't even look at me. Just kept repeating that this is what the real work world is like, and this sort of thing will happen in real life and I need to find a way through it, and all other sorts of useless guidance. In effect, I wasted at least an hour of my life in his office. The department chair had an office in the same hallway, a few doors down. Having no other options, I just sat down in the hallway against the door waiting for him. People would pass by and look at me, some would smile, most didn't. A college student sitting against an office door in a hallway reeks of desperation and hopelessness, which sums up the entire college very nicely in retrospect. After what feels like forever, the department chair arrives, lets me in, and says I have 20 minutes before he has an appointment downstairs, so make it brief. I gathered my thoughts and made the same case I made to the professor, how I was being sabotaged by my teammates, and the professor refused to hear me out. At one point I challenged the chair about why I'm not going to be graded on my merits and knowledge, but rather who I was associated with involuntarily to begin with. Finally, he had to dismiss me from his office to get to his meeting but told me he'd look into this, and shook my hand. No commitments, no promises, just a handshake. Deadline. The different teams present their products, and the professor does his interrogations in a way that makes the trolls of Reddit seem like enlightened scholars. He used his plus 30 years of experience to effectively shoot down everyone on every team in any area they felt they adequately covered. Hypothetical situations and impossibilities of costs and scale that turned what was at first a fun project of theory crafting with field-specific knowledge into what can only be described as technical draft reading in front of a one-man firing squad. Then the dreaded moment arrives when my team has to present. We get to the front of the class and know what's coming our way. My seated classmates all had the look of exhaustion and defeat on their faces, and I knew I'd soon be one of them. At this school, you got used to being beaten. To give you all the scene, I'm a 5 feet 9 inches skinny white kid, next to 4'6" tall Indians who each had at least 30 to 50 pounds on me, so I'm the runt of the litter up there. I pull out my 8 pages and start reading. Don't even get off the first page before the professor starts poking holes in individual statements. I politely asked him to hold all questions until the end, so I wouldn't lose my place on the paper, and because I hoped he'd forget most of them by the end, to which he agreed and smiled. Then he walked up to his desk, got a pad of paper and a pen, sat back down, and told me to continue. I smiled at him because it's all I could do in that moment of defeat. Instead of taking small beatings along the way, I was gonna get ducking destroyed by a barrage at the end. Jumping out the window looked like a good option at this point, second floor, so I'd live, and probably be able to hobble off with a sprain. By the time I got to the end of page 8, he was on page 3. My classmates had looks of fear and shock when they saw him turning over page after page to jot down notes and questions. For an old bast *RD, he was meticulous, I'll give him that. So I get to the end, and I ask him if he had any questions he'd like to ask the group. At this point, I was the only one who had said a word, so it was high ducking time my other teammates chimed in to help. His questions were just as sharp and pointed as the ones he asked other teams. Very advanced, and frankly beyond my level. After he'd read a question, I'd call out one of the others and say, "That's an intriguing point you made, sir. I'll let my teammate explain that part of the product and hope it'll answer your question." I handed my pages to the teammate and let fate take its course. Now we've all come across people who think they're great at bullshitting but aren't. You let them dig a hole for a while, then fill it in with them at the bottom. The professor did exactly that. He set them up, gave them a length, then yanked the leash back and called them out on their misunderstanding of the topic, or the product, or the part of the course that explained it. Each question I directed to another teammate, one after another. Number 3 tried to pass, but that just angered the professor, which made him even worse. He started calling out those 4 graduate students, asking them to describe certain parts of the product. Which is what he was writing down on his pad of paper the entire time, not just questions. Number 4 tried defensive answers and stalling tactics, which again, just angered the professor. In the end, he threw us out of the class. I'll never forget that. He went on a 5 minutes tirade of how we treated our final project as a joke, it was the worst presentation he'd ever seen in his history at the school, and how we should all be ashamed of ourselves if this was our best effort. I was already sweating bullets from fear and anxiety, and after that speech, I was glad to be the first one out the door. Skipped my other classes, went back to the dorm, locked myself in my room, and went to bed at 3 p.m. Didn't know what else to do, and I was mentally exhausted, that kind of exhausted where your brain just goes into shutdown because you can't figure a way out of a mess that you shouldn't have been in the first place. Didn't leave the dorm the next day, nor eat for the 24 hours, didn't even want to drink as I knew that'd make the depression worse. I'd have plenty of time for drinking after telling my parents I wasn't graduating. 2 days after the presentation, I got an email from the professor, asking for a meeting in room 123, where room 123 was the chairman's office. I accepted and arrived 5 minutes early, with both the professor and the chair already inside. We started early and got right to the point, with the professor looking right at me and asking, "What happened here?" as he pointed to my 8-page report on the desk. I explained it as best I could, the product, the function, the technology used, and then he stopped me. He didn't care about that, he wanted to know why I was the only one on the team who had an idea of what the presentation was about. The chair asked if I had bothered working with my teammates at all since they, apparently, seemed clueless about what I was presenting about. Naturally, I denied the claim, opening my sent emails folder on my laptop to show all the times I reached out to them, and how infrequently they replied. I told him about the in-person meetings in the beginning, and how I only found out 2 days before the deadline that they weren't doing anything to contribute. I gently reminded them both that I was in their offices as soon as I found out where this was all heading, but I admitted that I should have kept a better track of their progress. I learned a long time ago that a little humility and admitting your faults, no matter how small, goes a long way. The chair let out a huff of air through his nose and looked to my professor. I couldn't tell if it was contempt or not, but it made me feel slightly more at ease. The last question I got asked was if the packet of papers was all my original work. "Did you write this, all of this, solo?" To which I replied that I had, except the one paragraph that I did a direct quote, but cited properly at the bottom of the page. Grades got posted the next week for all my classes. I did decently but knew I was ducked because of the 493 class. The grade posted though was AB. I refreshed the page several times to make sure it wasn't a formatting problem with the site, a common problem back then, but the grade held. I stopped by the professor's office later that day after one of the other classes and asked why I got that grade. I explained that I had legitimately thought I had failed based on the final project. The chair suggested that my team not be graded according to the previously mentioned system, and be given grades directly from the professor, as is normal in every other class. My part of the work, while lacking in several areas, was acceptable for an undergraduate student. He admitted in plain English that he treats undergrads with more aggression because the world is not a nice place, and you should learn that lesson here where you can get back up after a fall. I told him I appreciated the hard lesson, but there might be better ways of going about it. He didn't care, and I wasn't surprised he didn't either. Turns out that I was not the only one they met with in the office. The graduate students were called in one at a time and were required to bring their parts of the project to the meeting. They all plagiarized. They were either too stupid or too lazy to even try and hide it. The chair ran their papers through one of those plagiarism detection programs and they all came back with plus 90% certainty. One of them, I'll never know who, copied straight from Wikipedia, verbatim. Graduate students. He repeated his claim that it was one of the worst presentations he'd ever seen, and how it was shameful, but this time around I knew he was referring to the graduate students and not me. At the end of the meeting, I shook his hand, not as a courtesy, but out of respect. His teaching style was unorthodox but damned if it wasn't effective. I'll never forget the lessons learned from that class, and I don't mean the coursework. As for the graduate students, failed, each of them, and 2 more that weren't in my group. It was a mini-scandal sort of thing on campus, everyone in the major heard about it, and it was the talk of the dining hall for a couple of days. Because of the grades, and the plagiarism hit on their record, they all lost their student visas. While I can't be 100% sure they were deported, the plagiarism charge means they can't come back to the school, and no other schools will touch them for at least a couple of semesters. They can't get a job in the country without a valid visa either, so it effectively ended them. My degree hangs above my desk at home and reminds me of those hard lessons learned. Here are some comments. First commenter Peppa G. Bravo on dumping the questions on your teammates and letting karma do its work. I've had similar situations, only that I always used to finish my teammates' parts and deliver the entire report. Maybe I should have done what you did, but it must take balls apparently, I lack balls. Second commenter band_accounts. Holy shit, that was worth the read. I'm really glad that it worked out in your favor and the professor was sensible about teaching his lesson. I hope you haven't had to deal with any people pulling that shit in the real world. And duck those guys, I'm glad they got what was coming to them. Third commenter Kashmir09. At first, I was going to skip reading this as it was lengthy. but I decided to give it a shot. Oh, boy am I glad I didn't mess up this opportunity. Amazing story OP, very glad everything worked out for you in the end. Fourth commenter SLLLR. Worth the long post. Great story and great job sticking with your work and not giving up. Hey guys, if you love this revenge story, please give it a like and comment your views about it, and subscribe to the channel if you want more revenge stories. Now moving to the final story of the video posted by Wichitits. Shortly after my father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, my formerly estranged half-brother quit his job and moved in to help take care of my dad. Though there wasn't enough money, it was agreed to pay him around $300 a week to make up for his missing income. During this time, my half-brother abruptly acquired durable power of attorney and usurped medical and financial. My mother and father had separate financial lives, decisions. Several documents relating to my dad's pension, which were now my half-brother's responsibility, were not turned in on time, resulting in my dad missing out on a one-time payout of $8,000 and lowering his pension payout by $300 per month. My half-brother cleaned out my dad's remaining savings, about $3,000, not discovered until about a month later. 6 days later, our father hung himself in the basement. My dad left all of his insurance money and belongings to my mother. Us children were left with only sentimental items. My half-brother was visibly upset and shaking when the will was read. He acknowledged that my mother was receiving everything and left. About a month later we discovered the missing money. Though he broke no laws because he had power of attorney, we insisted he pay it back, even offered to let him make payments over 2 years. He refused and we have been no contact for 2 years now. Little did he know that he was in my mom's, his stepmother's, will. He would receive half of what is currently a $250,000 estate. I suggested to my mother that she remove him from the will. She did, and I am now the sole beneficiary. He stole $3,000 now only to lose out on $125,000 later. TLDR. Half-brother stole $3,000 from sick father only to be removed from the will and miss out on $125,000 later. Here are some comments. First commenter Iconella_Corodens. Make sure it's mentioned that she left him nothing in the will, so he can't claim that she forgot. Second commenter K1R0V_report1NG. I'd love to be there when he realizes he isn't getting a wooden nickel from mom. And I would tell him exactly why, too. Shame he couldn't get any jail time or charges pressed. Third commenter RIUK811. Just have her leave him a penny. Then he can't contest the will. Thank you guys for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you liked it, please hit the like button and comment below. If you don't want to miss such more videos, please don't forget to subscribe to us.